Hello there, and welcome to Deep Space Sleep. I'm grateful that you're here, settling into a calm and spacious moment where your breath can slow and your thoughts can loosen. This evening, we're drifting into something quietly cosmic. The solar wind, the gentle, continuous breath of our star. Not a storm, not a roar, but a soft, steady outflow of light and charged particles that has flowed across space for billions of years. As daylight fades on Earth, this ancient breeze keeps moving through the darkness. Near the sun, waves of plasma rise like shimmering heat, lifting into space with quiet inevitability. Farther out, the wind stretches into long spirals, wrapping the planets in a soft magnetic hush. Even here, around our own world, it brushes against Earth's magnetic shield, guiding particles into arcs of aurora that glow silently above the poles. Yet all of this unfolds without urgency, calm, continuous, unchanged across ages. Solar wind is not dramatic, it's gentle, rhythmic, a cosmic tide that ties every planet, every comet, and every drifting grain of dust into the sun's slow, breathing pulse. It is the soft architecture of space, shaping boundaries, carrying magnetic memory, and whispering through the heliosphere with peaceful steadiness. Tonight, you'll drift through 100 soothing glimpses of this hidden flow, the quiet physics, the delicate patterns, and the serene movements that guide our solar system. So let your breathing slow, let your thoughts stretch outward, let the calm rhythm of the solar wind surround you like a quiet, starlit current. If you'd like, you can share where you're listening from tonight. Your words help build this gentle space for others settling into rest. Whenever you're ready, let's begin. Near the quiet surface of the sun, motion begins as a shimmer, then unfolds into a gentle outward breath. Plasma slowly unlocks from the sun's outer layers, in a motion that feels almost like rising mist. At the boundary of the photosphere and the corona, charged particles loosen their ties to the hotter, denser regions below and begin drifting upward through shimmering waves of heat. Science describes this as plasma escaping from magnetic confinement, but it feels more like a soft exhale, a quiet release of energy that has waited patiently beneath the surface. As the particles rise, they thin and brighten, slipping into the high, glowing atmosphere, where the sun's light becomes a warm guide rather than a tether. The beginning of the solar wind is gentle, airy, and unhurried. A slow transition from anchored heat to open space. And as this first breath lifts away, you can feel your own thoughts rising with it, drifting into a calmer, looser place. As this early plasma drifts upward, the gentle expansion of coronal gases creates a soft outward push that carries everything farther from the sunday. In the corona's thin, shimmering light, heated particles spread out the way. Warm air rises above a quiet field at dusk. Their movement is subtle, almost delicate, yet it extends across millions of miles with surprising consistency. The science is simple. Gas expands when heated, and the corona is incredibly hot. But the feeling is something more peaceful, like watching a slow, glowing tide unfurl. Each particle follows the warmth, stretching the solar atmosphere outward until it finally becomes the wind that fills the inner solar system. It is here, in this quiet expansion, that the solar wind first finds its rhythm. And as you imagine it flowing outward, you may feel your own breath lengthen into that same gentle pace. With the corona expanding softly outward, magnetic tension begins, guiding the earliest flows like invisible threads, shaping a luminous stream. Solar magnetic fields twist and arc across the sun's surface, creating pathways where charged particles can glide more easily. These lines bend and relax with the sun's rotation, slowly releasing stored energy into the drifting plasma. What could feel chaotic becomes smooth, as though the wind is being combed into calm, organized strands. In science, this is magnetic field topology. In sensation, it is more like watching silk ribbons move through warm air, guided but never forced. The particles follow these arcs outward, gaining quiet direction and forming the earliest contours of the solar wind. And as you picture these soft magnetic lines stretching into space, you may feel your own thoughts finding a gentle path guided into stillness. Between the suns, sunspots lie quiet zones where the magnetic field softens and the surface appears almost serene. In these regions, without strong magnetic turbulence, the early solar wind forms smoother textures, drifting upward in broad, calm sheets. Sunspots create intense, tangled fields, but the spaces between them offer a stillness where plasma can ease outward without sudden jolts. Here, the wind gathers its gentlest qualities: flat currents, steady movement, a softness that feels almost like the hush between waves on a warm shoreline. These quiet corridors help shape the overall texture of the solar wind, balancing the more active, energetic regions with long stretches of peace. And imagining these calm zones opening on the sun's surface, you may feel a similar opening within yourself, a widening sense of ease spreading through your thoughts. As these smooth currents rise, light pressure begins assisting the escape of early particles, pushing gently outward like a warm, ever-present breeze. Photons, streaming from the sun, impart tiny nudges to dust and charged particles, guiding them into the expanding flow. The effect is subtle. Each push is unimaginably small, but across countless particles and immense distances, it becomes a quiet but persistent encouragement, helping matter drift into interplanetary space. Scientifically, this is radiation pressure. Emotionally, it feels like sunlight laying a hand on the wind, ushering it forward with tenderness. The particles respond by gliding a little farther, a little faster, joining the forming solar wind with effortless grace. And as you imagine this soft, luminous push, you might feel a similar hint of lightness within yourself, as though something is gently encouraging you toward rest. Thin streams emerge from open magnetic fields like luminous pathways quietly unfolding on the sun's surface. In regions where magnetic lines stretch outward instead of curving back, plasma finds an easy escape route into space. These open fields act almost like clear mountain passes, allowing thin ribbons of charged particles to drift upward with minimal resistance. Science describes this as plasma, following field-aligned currents. Yet the impression is much softer, like threads of warm light rising into a vast, glowing sky. The streams begin narrow, shimmering with the sun's golden heat, and gradually widen as they ascend through the corona's airy heights. Their motion is smooth, graceful, and astonishingly calm for something born from such an energetic star. As you imagine these delicate currents lifting upward, you might feel your own thoughts rising in a similar way, stretching gently into a more spacious and restful inner horizon. Coronal temperatures lift ions into motion with heat so intense it becomes almost tender in its effect. In the outer layers of the sun, temperatures soar to astonishing levels, giving particles enough energy to break free and ascend like tiny sparks drifting through a shimmering atmosphere. Scientifically, this process is thermal acceleration, where heat imparts velocity to ions, but the experience feels more like watching golden dust stir above a warm fire. As ions absorb this immense yet gentle heat, they loosen, brighten, and float upward through rippling layers of light. The corona's thinness makes the movement even softer, allowing particles to spread outward in long, lazy arcs. This upward drift becomes the quiet foundation of the solar wind, beginning not with violence but with warmth. And as these ions rise in your imagination, you might sense a similar warmth within yourself, lifting tension from the body and letting the mind expand into stillness. Patterns form as solar rotation stretches the emerging streams into long, elegant spirals drifting through interplanetary space. The sun rotates slowly, carrying its magnetic fields and plasma with it, and this gentle turning motion shapes the solar wind into the iconic Parker spiral. Though the physics involve angular momentum and fluid-like plasma behavior, the sensation is almost artistic, like watching ribbons of light being drawn into soft, swirling arcs. These spirals grow broader and smoother as they extend outward, forming vast cosmic brushstrokes that guide the solar wind across millions of miles. Their curves hold both structure and fluidity, a balance of quiet order and drifting motion. As you imagine these luminous spirals unfurling farther into space, you may feel your thoughts following the same graceful trajectory, settling into an easy rhythm that matches the slow, steady turning of the sun itself. The first slow solar breeze leaves the corona like a long, quiet breath escaping into open space. Near the point where the sun's gravity weakens and the corona thins, particles drift outward in soft, expanding waves. Though science marks this transition as the location where plasma flow becomes supersonic, the feeling is anything but abrupt. Instead, the breeze moves with the gentleness of morning mist rolling across a valley. Particles separate, spread out, and glide forward with a calm that belies the immense energies involved. This early breeze carries traces of the sun's warmth, light, and magnetic patterns, like subtle memories woven into its flow. As you picture this first exhale of solar wind drifting into the vastness, you may feel your own breath deepen and lengthen, mirroring the serene release that begins here at the edge of the corona, where everything becomes lighter, wider, and easier. The solar wind begins its long journey across space as a quiet, expanding tide of charged particles moving outward from the sun with steady grace. Though traveling at hundreds of kilometers per second, the motion feels unhurried when viewed across the immense distances of the heliosphere. The wind spreads into vast, diffuse currents that wrap the planets in gentle pressure, shaping magnetic fields and brushing against comet tails with a soft, continuous presence. Scientifically, it is a flow of plasma carrying the sun's magnetic imprint. But in imagery, it resembles a golden river stretching endlessly through a dark, starlit ocean. Every particle within it drifts with calm persistence, guided by subtle fields and the memory of its coronal origins. As you imagine this long, tranquil journey unfolding across billions of miles, you may feel your own thoughts lengthen and drift into a wider calm, carried by the same quiet momentum that fills all of interplanetary space. As the breeze drifts outward, it takes on patterns, soft spirals, long arcs, and wide, quiet plains. Slow wind and fast wind regions form like differing textures within a single, gentle current. The slow wind emerges from closed magnetic areas near the sun's equator, drifting outward with a relaxed, almost drowsy pace. The fast wind, born from open coronal holes near the poles, streams ahead like a smoother, more confident flow. Though their speeds differ greatly, the contrast feels less like turbulence and more like two layers of a calm river moving side by side. Science describes velocity, gradients, and plasma acceleration, yet the imagery is of soft currents merging without disturbance, weaving together across millions of miles. As these regions blend, they create subtle patterns in pressure and motion that give the solar wind its quiet structure. Imagining these layered flows drifting outward, you might sense your own thoughts, settling into slow and fast rhythms that balance gently within you. The Parker spiral forms from solar rotation, shaping the solar wind into a graceful, ever-widening curve. As the sun turns, its magnetic field stretches outward with the drifting plasma, creating a long, spiraling pattern that fills the heliosphere. Though physics describes it through angular rotation and radial expansion, the visual feels like watching a luminous ribbon unwind in slow motion across a dark sea. The spiral widens steadily, softening into an elegant sweep that touches every planet's orbit. It is one of the most serene structures in space, a pattern made from rotation, distance, and patience. As you imagine this spiral drifting outward, expanding with calm assurance, you may feel your own awareness following its gentle arc, loosening, lengthening, and settling into a deeper state of ease. Quiet density waves travel through space like faint ripples moving across a vast, invisible ocean. These waves arise when regions of slightly higher or lower particle concentration drift outward together, creating soft, rhythmic undulations in the solar wind. Scientifically, they appear as fluctuations in plasma density, but the sensation is far more peaceful, gentle pulses spreading through an endless calm. Each wave travels millions of miles, maintaining its soft shape even as it expands. They do not crash or break, they glide, shifting the wind's structure with a touch so delicate it is almost imperceptible. Imagining these faint ripples moving through space, you might sense your own breath forming similar waves within you, rising and falling with quiet steadiness, soothing your thoughts as they drift into a wider, slower rhythm. Large-scale, smooth magnetic sectors appear in the solar wind as broad regions where the magnetic field points consistently in one direction, creating long stretches of calm, unified flow. These sectors form when the sun's rotating magnetic field extends outward, dividing space into gentle magnetic planes. Scientifically, they represent polarity patterns carried by the solar wind, but their presence feels like entering wide, serene plateaus where everything aligns. In these regions, the wind stabilizes, turbulence eases, and the magnetic field becomes a soft guiding hand, shaping the plasma's path. The boundaries between sectors are subtle, like the faintest shift in color across a horizon. As you imagine drifting through one of these vast magnetic planes, you may feel a similar sense of alignment within yourself, as if the mind were smoothing into one quiet direction. The wind retains a memory of the sun's rotation, carrying subtle traces of movement from its birthplace across billions of miles. As plasma escapes the corona, it is gently imprinted with the sun's turning motion, preserving the rhythm of its rotation within the magnetic field and flow patterns. Even far from the sun, this memory remains a soft echo of the star's slow spin, woven into the structure of space. Scientifically, this is expressed through azimuthal magnetic components and spiraling field lines. Yet, in imagery, it feels like the solar wind carries the sun's heartbeat, stretching it outward into the quiet of interplanetary space. As you imagine this ancient rotation drifting through the wind, you might sense your own internal rhythms softening, syncing with a slower, deeper pulse that brings the body and mind toward rest. Gentle boundary layers form between solar wind streams like soft, shifting veils separating currents of different speeds and temperatures. When fast wind overtakes slow wind, the transition does not behave like a crashing wave. Instead, it creates a smooth, gradual interface where particles mingle and adjust. Scientifically, these are interaction regions marked by density gradients and magnetic shifts. Yet in sensation, they resemble the quiet blending of warm and cool air at sunset. These layers stretch across millions of miles, shaping the flow without disturbing its serenity. They guide particles into more organized paths, smoothing turbulence and giving the wind a subtle structure. As you imagine these soft boundaries drifting outward, you may feel your own thoughts creating gentle borders within themselves, separating the fast from the slow, the busy from the quiet, until everything settles into a balanced, peaceful exchange. Radial expansion thins the solar wind across millions of miles, spreading particles outward like a delicate mist dispersing into open air. As the wind moves away from the sun, it expands in every direction, its density lowering steadily while its calm presence grows wider. Science explains this through conservation of mass and spherical geometry. But visually it feels like watching the faint glow of a lantern dissolve into the night, becoming softer the farther it travels. Each particle drifts into greater spacing, creating a spacious stillness inside the wind's flow. This thinning does not weaken the wind. Rather, it gives it room to breathe, shaping the vastness of the heliosphere. And as you imagine this gentle outward spreading, you might feel your own awareness widening, releasing pressure and finding comfort in the spacious quiet that opens around it. Subtle changes in hissing magnetic turbulence move through the solar wind like faint whispers carried across an enormous, nearly silent ocean. These fluctuations arise from interactions between particles and magnetic fields, creating tiny eddies and ripples within the plasma flow. Though scientifically described as Alfvénic turbulence, the effect feels calmer than the name suggests, more like the soft static of distant wind brushing across dry grass. These variations help distribute energy gently throughout the wind, keeping it warm and in motion as it drifts far from the Sunday. They shift slowly, never overwhelming the serenity of the overall flow. Imagining these delicate magnetic murmurs passing through space, you may sense a similar quiet vibration within yourself. A peaceful hum that loosens tension and lets the mind settle deeper into rest. Long, calm corridors form between energetic regions of the solar wind, creating vast pathways of stillness where particles drift with almost effortless ease. These corridors appear when active. Fast-moving streams separate naturally, leaving behind wide stretches of smooth, steady flow. Scientifically, they represent areas of reduced turbulence and stable magnetic alignment, but emotionally they feel like tranquil hallways carved across the solar system, lit by the dim glow of scattered particles. In these corridors, the wind slows slightly, softens, and becomes more uniform, offering a sense of spacious calm. As you imagine gliding through one of these serene passages, you may feel your own thoughts slipping into a similar quiet channel, where distractions fall away and the mind moves gently, unhurried, toward deeper stillness. The solar wind fills the heliosphere with gentle pressure, creating an enormous protective bubble that surrounds the sun and every planet within its reach. Though the wind grows thinner with distance, it maintains enough presence to push back the interstellar medium, carving out a vast space dominated by the sun's influence. Science describes this as dynamic pressure balancing external forces, but the feeling is far softer, like a warm, extended breath holding a quiet boundary around home. Within this bubble, particles drift peacefully. Magnetic fields stretch into long arcs, and the solar wind's steady outward flow shapes the environment of every world we know. As you imagine this immense, gentle pressure surrounding the solar system, you might feel a similar boundary form around yourself, a protective calm that lets everything inside become lighter, quieter, and deeply at ease. Open magnetic field lines guide particles outward, like glowing pathways stretching into space. At the sun's surface, some magnetic lines do not curl back but extend freely into the corona, offering charged particles a clear direction to follow. Science explains that ions stream along these field-aligned routes, accelerating gently as they rise. But the image feels more like watching tiny sparks drift along luminous threads pulled taut by sunlight. These open lines act as quiet guides, shaping the earliest motions of the solar wind and giving it soft coherence even in its first steps away from the Sunday. As the particles move, their crossing into higher altitudes appears almost graceful, like lanterns floating upward into a still night. Imagining these open magnetic threads stretching outward, you might sense your own thoughts following a similarly smooth path, rising out of crowded spaces and into something wide, calm, and effortlessly free. Closed magnetic loops trap and release plasma in rhythms that resemble slow breathing patterns across the solar surface. These loops bend upward and reconnect back into the photosphere, forming arches filled with hot, shimmering plasma that rises and falls in gentle pulses. Scientifically, they act like magnetic containers, confining ions until heat and pressure guide them outward. Yet their motion feels soft, like warm tides rolling within bright, curved shells. When conditions shift, parts of these loops open briefly, letting plasma drift free and join the solar wind in smooth, glowing waves. Each release happens quietly, without rush, like a deep exhale spreading into light. As you imagine these luminous arches filling and emptying, you may feel your own breath synchronizing with their rhythm, settling into a slow, steady flow that brings warmth and calm into your entire body. Slow magnetic undulations carry themselves outward through the solar wind, like gentle waves traveling across a tranquil sea. These undulations form when the sun's magnetic field shifts and vibrates, sending quiet ripples through the surrounding plasma. Science refers to them as alphen waves, but their presence feels far softer than their name, more like the faint rise and fall of a distant tide moving under starlight. As these magnetic waves drift outward, they help transfer energy without disturbing the wind's calm structure, spreading warmth and motion through otherwise silent regions. Their movement is smooth, unhurried, and steady, giving the solar wind a subtle pulse that extends across millions of miles. Imagining these soft magnetic waves traveling outward, you may feel a similar wave moving through yourself, a quiet, rhythmic loosening that helps the mind drift gently toward rest. Regions of low turbulence ride through the solar wind like smooth rivers flowing through a vast, open landscape. In these peaceful stretches, magnetic fields align softly, and particles drift in balanced, gentle currents. Science describes them as intervals of reduced fluctuation in plasma velocity and density, but the feeling is like gliding across calm water where every motion becomes effortless. These peaceful corridors help maintain the solar wind's stability, giving long sections of space a serene, unbroken texture. As particles pass through these regions, they move with quiet continuity, neither rushed nor disturbed. Imagining yourself drifting along one of these smooth magnetic rivers, you may sense your mind settling into a similar flow, leaving behind the turbulence of thought and entering a wide, steady calm that carries you deeper into rest. Magnetic switchbacks bend the solar wind gently, turning field lines in sudden but soft reversals that travel outward like folded ribbons of light. These switchbacks form when magnetic fields twist and snap into new alignments near the sun, creating pockets where the direction of the magnetic field briefly flips. Though the physics involve dynamic plasma processes, their behavior appears calm at large scales, like a breeze shifting direction without breaking its overall smoothness. As switchbacks drift through space, they fold the solar wind into subtle curves, adding texture without introducing chaos. Their presence shows how living and flexible the sun's magnetic breath truly is. Imagining these softly bent ribbons moving outward, you may feel your own thoughts bending away from rigid patterns, opening into gentler shapes that invite ease, release, and deeper quiet. The interplanetary magnetic field forms as the sun's own magnetic breath stretches outward, carried gently by the drifting solar wind. As plasma escapes the corona, it drags magnetic field lines with it, unfurling them into long, spiraling shapes that fill the solar system. Science describes this process as magnetic field line freezing in to the plasma. But the imagery feels far calmer, like threads of golden silk being pulled slowly through a quiet current. These lines twist softly with the sun's rotation, weaving a delicate structure that surrounds every planet and comet. Far from the sun, the field becomes faint but steady, shaping the paths of charged particles with a touch so light it resembles a whisper of direction rather than force. Imagining this vast magnetic web stretching through space, you might sense a similar, gentle guidance around your thoughts, helping them drift with ease into calmer patterns. Ions drift quietly along magnetic pathways, as if following softly illuminated trails through an immense, serene landscape. Each charged particle feels the presence of the interplanetary magnetic field and aligns its movement gently with its curves. Scientifically, this is motion guided by the Lorentz force, but the sensation is far more peaceful, like floating along a slow river that never pushes, only guides. As ions travel, they create faint streams of motion that stretch across millions of miles, maintaining a steady rhythm shaped by the sun's rotation and the wind's outward flow. Their quiet drift gives the solar wind its smooth coherence, softening fluctuations and maintaining direction across distances that defy imagination. Imagining these particles gliding along invisible paths, you may feel your own thoughts slipping into similar guidance, following calm internal lines toward deeper stillness and gentle release. Large-scale magnetic sheets drift quietly through the solar wind like enormous, gently moving curtains of invisible fabric. These sheets form where the sun's magnetic polarity flips, creating vast planes of subtle magnetic change carried outward by the wind. Though science describes them as heliospheric current sheet structures, the experience feels softer, almost serene, long, smooth surfaces gliding through space with patient steadiness. As they move, these sheets shape the organization of the wind, dividing regions of different magnetic alignment while maintaining a calm, unbroken flow. They drift for months, bending slightly with the solar rotation, stretching across millions of miles like tranquil boundaries in a cosmic sky. Imagining these gentle sheets passing by, you may sense a similar quiet layer forming within yourself, separating noise from peace and letting the deeper calm expand into the space they create. Boundaries between magnetic sectors form as subtle, shifting lines where the direction of the interplanetary magnetic field gently changes. These boundaries do not appear as sharp edges, but as soft transitions, like the faint blending of two colors along a distant horizon. Scientifically, they are regions where polarity reverses, formed by the rotation of the sun and the structure of the current sheet. Yet the feeling they evoke is quiet and delicate. As the solar wind carries these boundaries outward, they drift serenely through space, marking different magnetic regions without disturbing the wind's calm texture. Crossing, one would feel like stepping from warm air into slightly cooler air, noticeable, but never abrupt. Imagining these gentle transitions moving through the solar system, you might sense a similar shift within your own thoughts. A soft reorientation towards stillness that invites your mind to settle more deeply. Magnetic wind patterns persist for months, maintaining quiet structures shaped by the sun's rotation and the rhythm of its magnetic field. These patterns drift steadily outward, returning again and again as the sun turns, like recurring motifs in a long, soothing song. Scientifically, this persistence arises because plasma carries magnetic order with it, preserving large-scale features as they travel across billions of miles. Yet the sensation is far simpler and more peaceful. Gentle waves repeating across a vast ocean, each one familiar and subtly comforting. As these patterns endure, they give the solar wind a sense of continuity, allowing distant regions of space to feel the lingering imprint of the sun's earlier states. Imagining these long-lived magnetic rhythms moving outward, you may feel your own thoughts settling into a similar continuity, a calm internal cycle that repeats softly, guiding you toward rest with patient, rhythmic ease. With distance, the wind softens, spreading into the great quiet of interplanetary space. Solar wind pressure thins steadily as particles drift farther from the sun, expanding into an ever larger sphere where their density becomes lighter and more spacious. Scientifically, this is simple radial expansion. As the wind fills more volume, its pressure fades, but the feeling is much gentler, like watching a warm breath disperse into cool morning air. Each particle slows its closeness to its neighbors, creating a sense of openness that grows mile by mile. The outward push of the wind becomes a soft background presence, shaping space without force, guiding charged particles with the faintest of touches. As you imagine this thinning pressure stretching through the heliosphere, you may feel your own inner pressures soften too, releasing tension and letting your thoughts drift outward toward a wider, quieter horizon. As the solar wind expands, it shapes the near space around planetary orbits with subtle but persistent guidance. The wind is not strong enough to alter orbits, yet it gently sculpts the environment through which planets travel, clearing dust, guiding charged particles, and influencing magnetic interactions. Scientifically, this shaping comes from pressure forces and carried magnetic fields. But the imagery is softer, like a slow current flowing around stones in a wide river, creating calm eddies and shifting patterns. Each planet feels the wind differently, its magnetic field or atmosphere responding with unique movements and quiet adjustments. Over time, this creates serene, stable regions around orbits where particle flow settles into predictable textures. Imagining this delicate shaping, you may sense your own internal environment adjusting with similar gentleness, forming small pockets of calm that help the mind settle and flow more smoothly. Gentle interactions with comet tails occur when the solar wind meets dust and ions trailing behind these icy travelers. As a comet approaches the sun, sunlight warms its surface, releasing gas and dust that stretch into long, shimmering tails. When the solar wind reaches them, it does not strike violently. Instead, it brushes past with a soft magnetic touch, guiding iron tails into luminous blue streams pointing away from the sunday. The science involves charged particles swept along magnetic field lines, but the feeling is like watching delicate fabric lift in a quiet breeze. Dust tails respond differently, drifting in slower arcs shaped by both light and wind. Each encounter becomes a serene dance of particles, light, and motion. Imagining this meeting between comet and wind, you may feel a similar gentle brushing at the edge of your awareness, a soft redirection of thoughts toward calm, drifting clarity. Across the vast distances of the heliosphere, long-range smoothing of particle flows turns chaotic beginnings into serene, steady currents. Near the sun, the wind varies in speed and density, but as it travels outward, these differences soften, stretching into broad, uniform streams. Scientifically, this occurs because faster particles move ahead, while slower ones lag behind, gradually evening out the flow. Yet the sensation is more peaceful, like watching ripples on water slowly flatten as they travel away from their source. Small turbulences fade, gradients diminish, and the wind becomes a wide, gentle field, moving with quiet consistency. Imagining this smoothing process, you may feel your own thoughts moving from scattered ripples into steady waves, settling into a soft mental rhythm that carries you deeper into rest. As the wind expands and thins, density drops, create calm void pockets, regions where particle numbers fall low enough that space feels almost empty. Scientifically, these pockets form naturally as radial expansion pulls particles farther apart, leaving behind vast, serene gaps. But the imagery is even quieter. Deep, spacious rooms within the solar wind, where silence seems to stretch endlessly. In these pockets, particles drift with even greater ease, unhurried and unconfined, and the magnetic field flows through them in smooth, gentle lines. These empty spaces give the heliosphere its sense of openness, allowing light, dust, and charged particles to travel with minimal disturbance. As you imagine these calm void pockets floating through space, you may sense your own inner landscape opening as well, creating a place where thoughts can settle softly into silence. Solar wind forms a vast protective bubble around the sun called the heliosphere, a gentle but expansive shield that stretches far beyond the outer planets. Scientifically, this bubble arises where the outward pressure of the wind balances the incoming push of interstellar particles. But the imagery feels softer, like a warm, glowing breath surrounding the entire solar system. Inside this boundary, planets drift in a sheltered sea of charged particles, their space shaped by the sun's steady exhale. The bubble is not rigid. It pulses slowly with solar activity, expanding and relaxing over years. Its surface is distant and faint, yet it provides a comforting sense of enclosure, a quiet boundary between our star's influence and the darker interstellar ocean beyond. As you imagine this immense protective bubble holding everything gently within it, you may feel a similar sphere of calm gathering around your own thoughts, creating space for rest. Solar wind steers cosmic dust grains with a soft, persistent touch that feels almost like a breeze guiding drifting pollen. These grains, scattered throughout the solar system, respond to both the flow of charged particles and the pressure of sunlight. Scientifically, this interplay is described through radiation pressure and Lorentz forces, yet its overall movement feels peaceful and unhurried. As dust encounters the solar wind, it reorganizes into faint trails, arcs, and drifting clouds that align subtly with the wind's direction. Over long periods, these gentle nudges shape dust patterns near planets, comets, and asteroid belts, creating a dynamic but serene architecture throughout interplanetary space. Imagining these delicate dust grains turning and drifting under the sun's quiet influence, you might sense your own thoughts being lightly steered as well, guided into smoother pathways that help the mind settle into a slow, restful flow. The slow drift toward the outer heliosphere unfolds like a long journey across an increasingly quiet ocean. As the solar wind travels farther from the sun, its density lessens, its pressure softens, and its movement becomes steadier and more spacious. Scientifically, this region marks the transition from the inner, more structured wind to the boundary zones that lead toward the termination shock. Yet the feeling is far gentler, a gradual fading of sound, light, and motion as the wind stretches into distant calm. Particles drift with fewer interactions, moving freely through wide, serene expanses. The magnetic field grows smoother, and turbulence dwindles into near silence. Imagining this slow outward drift, you may feel your own awareness moving toward a quieter edge within yourself, leaving behind the busy inner regions and settling into a deep, open stillness. Waves move through the solar wind like ripples, traveling across a deep, dark ocean, carrying gentle pulses of energy outward from the Sunday. These waves, known scientifically as magnetohydrodynamic fluctuations, spread through the plasma with soft, rhythmic motion. Their presence does not disturb the wind's calmness. Instead, they add a quiet texture, a subtle pattern of rising and falling that feels soothing in its consistency. Each wave travels vast distances, gradually stretching and smoothing as it moves through thinning plasma. The effect resembles watching long ripples glide across a quiet lake at dusk, their motion barely visible but deeply calming. Imagining these waves drifting through the heliosphere, you may sense a similar ripple settling through your body, a gentle undulation that releases tension and invites your thoughts to flow into deeper rest. The rhythm of the solar wind changes as solar activity cycles, shifting slowly through patterns that repeat over years. During quieter phases, the wind becomes more uniform, its streams steadier and its magnetic field softer. During active periods, faster streams emerge, sunspots increase, and the wind develops subtle variations in density and structure. Scientifically, this reflects the sun's 11-year magnetic cycle. But the feeling is of a slowly breathing organism whose patterns rise and fall with cosmic patience. These changes shape the texture of the entire heliosphere, influencing auroras, magnetic boundaries, and the flow of particles far beyond Earth. Imagining this rhythmic cycling, you may feel your own inner rhythms aligning with something larger and slower, a deep pulse of calm that unfolds across years rather than moments, encouraging the mind to release urgency and drift toward peaceful continuity. Near Earth, the wind meets a shield that bends, softens, and guides it into calmer currents. The magnetosphere deflects incoming solar wind streams with a gentle, sweeping motion that resembles a vast, invisible umbrella opening in space. Scientifically, this happens because Earth's magnetic field pushes charged particles aside, redirecting them around the planet rather than allowing them to flow straight inward. Yet the sensation is far softer, like a slow-moving breeze parting around a smooth stone in a river. As the wind approaches, it feels the magnetic tension and adjusts, curving gracefully around Earth's protective boundary. This deflection creates a quiet buffer zone where the wind's intensity fades, leaving behind calmer patterns of flow. Imagining this protective arc holding back the wind, you might feel a similar shield forming around your own thoughts, turning away the fast, distracting currents and leaving only a feeling of gentle, spacious safety. A quiet bow shock forms ahead of Earth, where the solar wind first encounters the magnetosphere, creating a soft, compressed region that acts like a cushion between flowing plasma and the planet's magnetic shield. Scientifically, The bow shock arises because the supersonic solar wind slows abruptly, but the imagery is much gentler, like the subtle piling of air in front of a gliding bird's wing. This region does not roar or crash. Instead, it smooths the transition from fast-moving particles to the guided flows that slide around Earth. The magnetic field absorbs part of the pressure, spreading it out into a calm, rounded boundary. As you imagine this bow-shaped buffer drifting ahead of our world, you may sense a similar softening at the front of your own awareness, a gentle slowing of thoughts before they reach you, giving your mind time to settle, breathe, and ease into stillness. Particles slide along magnetic field lines with a grace that feels almost like following softly glowing rails stretched across space. When charged particles encounter Earth's magnetic field, they spiral and drift along its curves, guided not by forceful pushes but by quiet, steady alignment. Scientifically, this motion is governed by the Lorentz force, yet in sensation, it resembles tiny sparks gliding along invisible threads woven around the planet. These field lines extend from pole to pole, forming elegant pathways that gently steer ions into arcs and loops. Some particles follow these lines downward toward the atmosphere, contributing to auroras, while others are carried outward into the magnetosphere's vast outer regions. Imagining these serene journeys along magnetic pathways, you might feel your own thoughts choosing smoother routes as well, moving naturally along lines of ease and clarity until they settle into calm, continuous flow. Behind Earth, the magnetotail stretches into space, like a long, quiet ribbon drawn out by the passing solar wind. This structure forms because the wind presses against the magnetosphere, elongating it into a graceful tail that extends millions of miles away from the Sunday. Scientifically, the magnetotail contains plasma sheets, field lines, and currents. But the imagery feels much softer, like a luminous, drifting scarf trailing behind a moving figure. Within this elongated region, magnetic fields become smooth and aligned, guiding particles into pathways that feel steady and unhurried. The magnetotail stores energy, releases it gently, and shapes the behavior of auroras on Earth's night side. Imagining this vast, tapering extension drifting behind our planet, you may feel your own thoughts lengthening in the same direction, stretching quietly into spaciousness, leaving behind the noise of the day as they flow into deeper calm. Inside the magnetotail, calm plasma sheets drift like wide, tranquil rivers, flowing through a dim and peaceful valley. These sheets form where magnetic fields flatten and charged particles move in slow, organized layers. Scientifically, they represent regions of balanced pressure and low turbulence, but their movement feels softer, like shimmering bands of mist gliding through a quiet canyon. Particles here travel gently, neither rushing nor colliding, creating a serene environment within the otherwise dynamic magnetosphere. These plasma sheets also play a key role in transmitting energy toward Earth, but they do so gradually, in smooth, continuous flows. Imagining these broad, peaceful layers drifting through the magnetotail, you may feel your own inner landscape forming similar sheets of calm, wide, steady spaces inside your thoughts where everything moves slowly, softly, and in harmony with a deeper, quieter rhythm. Dayside compression during strong winds occurs when faster, denser streams of solar wind push against Earth's magnetosphere, pressing its sun-facing side inward like a soft cushion being gently compressed. Scientifically, this happens because increased dynamic pressure forces the magnetic boundary closer to Earth. But the sensation is far gentler, like watching a shimmering bubble adjust its surface in response to a passing breeze. The magnetic field tightens, smoothing itself into a slightly smaller arc while still guiding particles calmly around the planet. Nothing feels abrupt. Even under stronger winds, the magnetosphere bends with quiet resilience, holding its shape while yielding just enough to maintain balance. Imagining this slow compression, you might sense your own mental boundaries, adjusting under pressure. Not with strain, but with subtle flexibility, allowing external forces to pass while you remain centered, steady, and softly protected inside your own calm inner space. On the night side, the magnetosphere expands and undergoes gentle reconnection, stretching outward like a long, relaxed breath, reaching into deep space. As solar wind flows past Earth, it pulls magnetic field lines into the magnetotail, where they eventually meet and merge in a quiet, distant region. Scientifically, this is magnetic reconnection, releasing stored energy. But the imagery feels softer, like two drifting threads joining with a delicate spark before unraveling into smooth, outward currents. The night-side expansion creates a peaceful elongation of the magnetic field, offering space for plasma to drift and reorganize. Occasionally, this reconnection sends gentle flows of energy back toward Earth, fueling auroras with graceful, upward-moving light. Imagining this serene stretching and merging, you may feel your own awareness lengthen into the quieter spaces behind you, letting tension dissolve as thoughts reorganize into calmer, more harmonious patterns. Subtle changes in field strength during quiet days create a soft, shifting background hum around Earth, almost like the faintest vibration in still air. When solar wind conditions are calm, Earth's magnetosphere relaxes into a smoother, rounder shape, and the magnetic field gently strengthens or weakens in response to slow variations in solar pressure. These changes are measured scientifically in nanoteslas, yet the feeling they evoke is closer to watching sunlight brighten and fade through a thin layer of clouds, delicate, continuous, soothing. The field becomes especially stable during these quiet intervals, creating ideal conditions for peaceful particle motion and minimal turbulence. Imagining these soft fluctuations, you may sense an echo within yourself, as if your own internal field were shifting gently in tune with a deeper calm, creating small adjustments that help your entire body and mind settle into an even quieter, more restful state. Earth's magnetic poles guide soft particle rain into the upper atmosphere, shaping the delicate arcs of auroras with quiet precision. When charged particles follow magnetic field lines downward, they spiral gently toward the polar regions, entering the atmosphere like drifting sparks dissolving into color. Scientifically, these are electrons colliding with oxygen and nitrogen, but the sensation feels more like a luminous snowfall settling over the sky. The poles act as gateways, drawing particles along curved paths that converge in graceful ovals around each hemisphere. As these particles descend, the atmosphere responds with green, red, and sometimes violet glows, shimmering in slow, fluid motions. Imagining this soft particle rain falling along invisible arcs, you may feel a similar descent of calm within yourself, as if light were settling gently into your thoughts, illuminating them with peaceful, weightless clarity. Long-term patterns shaped by solar cycles create slow, rhythmic changes in Earth's near-space environment, unfolding over years with the patience of an ancient tide. As the sun's magnetic activity rises and falls in its 11-year cycle, the solar wind shifts in texture, density, and magnetic complexity. Scientifically, these variations influence everything from auroral frequency to magnetospheric dynamics. Yet the imagery feels like watching the seasons of space unfold, calm periods expanding like gentle winters, active years blooming with subtle storms. Over time, these cycles leave imprints on Earth's magnetic behavior, shaping recurring patterns that govern particle flow and atmospheric interaction. Imagining these long, cosmic rhythms unfolding, you may feel your own sense of time slowing to match them, aligning your awareness with a broader, quieter cycle that invites patience, softness, and a deep, settling calm. When the wind touches a world with a magnetic heart, light blooms softly across its sky. Electrons spiral toward the poles along magnetic field lines, drifting inward on paths that curve like delicate ribbons pulled toward hidden gateways. Scientifically, their motion is governed by the Lorentz force, guiding charged particles into graceful spirals as they approach stronger magnetic regions. Yet the feeling is much more serene, like watching tiny sparks fall through a slow, swirling funnel of invisible light. As electrons descend, they accelerate gently, following field lines that narrow toward the polar atmosphere. Nothing about their motion is abrupt. Even their final approach feels like a quiet slide into a softer, denser world. Imagining these spiraling journeys downward, you may feel your own thoughts tracing similarly gentle curves, spiraling into a calmer, more centered awareness, where the mind begins to glow with peaceful clarity. Gentle excitation of atmospheric oxygen occurs when descending electrons finally meet the upper layers of air, transferring their energy in soft, luminous touches. Scientifically, the electrons collide with oxygen atoms, raising them into excited states, but the imagery feels more like fingertip brushes of light awakening a sleeping sky. These interactions happen more than 60 miles above Earth, in a region so thin and quiet that every collision seems to echo across empty space. The oxygen glows with a patient, emerald radiance, releasing its stored energy slowly, as though savoring the opportunity to paint the night. This gentle process forms the foundation of auroras, transforming invisible energy into delicate waves of color. Imagining this subtle exchange, you may sense a parallel within yourself, a moment when a small spark of energy softens into warmth, illuminating your inner landscape with a calm, steady glow. Soft green light shimmers in calm arcs across the polar sky, forming one of the most familiar and soothing expressions of the aurora. This green glow arises from excited oxygen atoms returning to their resting state, releasing their energy as smooth, elegant waves of light. Scientifically, these emissions occur at specific wavelengths, around 557 nanometers. Yet the sensation they evoke is far more dreamlike, gentle curtains of luminous mist swaying slowly in the darkness. The arcs form, drift, and dissolve, with a grace that feels entirely unhurried, guided by shifting magnetic lines and the quiet rhythm of the solar wind. Imagining these green arcs flowing overhead, you might feel a similar movement inside yourself, a soft, sweeping calm that gathers your thoughts and stretches them into long, peaceful shapes drifting through a silent night. Red auroras form in high, thin air, where oxygen atoms release their energy more slowly, creating long, faint glows that hover like quiet embers along the upper edge of the sky. Scientifically, these red emissions occur at altitudes above 200 kilometers, where the air is too sparse for rapid collisions, allowing light to linger in soft, extended waves. The imagery is soothing, gentle halos of crimson drifting above the brighter greens below, adding warmth and depth to the auroral palette. These red glows often appear during strong geomagnetic activity, yet they never feel harsh. Instead, they resemble distant lanterns floating over a calm, dark sea. Imagining these high, crimson veils suspended in stillness, you may feel your own thoughts rising lightly into higher mental space, becoming softer, slower, and gently illuminated from within. Proton auroras create faint glows that drift subtly across the sky, often so delicate they can be missed unless one watches with patient eyes. Unlike electron-driven auroras, these arise from energetic protons that collide with hydrogen atoms in the upper atmosphere, producing gentle, often reddish emissions. Scientifically, the process is more complex, involving charge exchange and slower particle motion, yet the resulting light feels incredibly soft, like a thin watercolor wash brushed lightly across the night. Proton auroras tend to form narrow, persistent bands that move gradually, guided by the quiet dynamics of Earth's magnetic field. Though they lack the boldness of more familiar auroras, their understated presence brings a sense of deep calm, as though the sky were breathing in muted, steady rhythms. Imagining these faint glows drifting across the darkness, you may feel a similar subtle calm spreading through your thoughts, easing you gently toward rest. Auroral ovals drift with solar activity, shifting their position and brightness like soft halos slowly gliding around the poles. Scientifically, These ovals mark the boundary where charged particles enter Earth's atmosphere, expanding and contracting as solar wind pressure changes. Yet the motion feels far gentler than the physics imply, like glowing rings sliding across a dark northern sky, responding to the sun's distant heartbeat. During active periods, the ovals widen and brighten, stretching toward lower latitudes. During quiet times, they shrink into delicate, concentrated loops of light. Their drifting patterns create a sense of the sky gently breathing, adjusting its luminous shape in harmony with changing conditions far away in space. Imagining these drifting ovals gliding across the poles, you may feel something similar inside yourself, a soft movement of awareness, responding quietly to subtle shifts, settling into a calmer orbit with every passing moment. The solar wind paints curtains of light across Earth's sky by guiding streams of charged particles into the upper atmosphere, where they release their energy in shimmering waves. Scientifically, these glowing shapes form as electrons interact with oxygen and nitrogen, but the sensation they create is far more poetic: wind becoming color, motion becoming softness. The auroral curtains ripple downward in long, flowing sheets that resemble delicate fabric stirred by an invisible hand. Sometimes they fold gently, other times they widen into broad, luminous drapes stretching from horizon to horizon. Their edges glow and fade with the rhythm of magnetic variations, turning the night into an ever-changing canvas. Imagining these painted curtains drifting overhead, you may sense your own thoughts softening into similar waves, flowing smoothly and quietly into places of deeper rest and warm, glowing calm. Auroras shift as magnetic fields breathe, changing shape and intensity with motions so subtle that the sky feels alive. Earth's magnetic field lines twist, stretch, and relax as they interact with the solar wind, guiding charged particles into patterns that move like slow, luminous tides. Scientifically, these changes arise from magnetospheric convection and reconnection, but the imagery is far gentler. A soft inhaling and exhaling of light. Arcs brighten as the field tightens, then fade into delicate wisps when it eases. Curtains drift sideways, spirals unwind, and faint glows gather into new shapes, all responding to the quiet adjustments happening deep within Earth's magnetic backbone. Imagining these breathing motions, you might feel your own inner field shifting with similar softness, expanding and settling in rhythms that help your thoughts loosen and your entire body drift toward peaceful stillness. Quiet, pulsating auroras appear during calm periods, glowing in gentle, rhythmic pulses that resemble the slow heartbeat of the sky. These auroras do not sweep dramatically across the horizon. Instead, they brighten and fade in place, often forming soft patches or diffuse clouds of light. Scientifically, their pulses arise from modulated particle precipitation linked to magnetospheric waves. Yet the experience feels soothing, light softly blinking in a steady, comforting rhythm. Each pulse lasts a few seconds, then melts away before returning again, like a distant lantern flickering in perfect harmony with a sleeping world. Their presence is subtle, requiring stillness and patience to appreciate, but once noticed, they bring a sense of profound calm. Imagining these quiet pulses drifting overhead, you may feel your own internal rhythm begin to slow, aligning with that soft celestial heartbeat and inviting your mind into deeper, quieter rest. Across seasons, multi-night patterns repeat in steady, familiar rhythms as auroras respond to long-term variations in solar wind and magnetic alignment. Some nights bring gentle arcs, others reveal slowly shifting curtains that return night after night, shaped by recurring high-speed streams from the Sunday. Scientifically, these patterns arise from solar rotation and stable coronal holes, but the effect feels like the sky revisiting the same soft melody in slightly different forms. Observers at high latitudes learn to recognize these quiet cycles, the way autumn brings frequent glows, or how spring reveals delicate, pastel movements. These repeating patterns create a sense of continuity, linking nights across months and years in a serene tapestry of light. Imagining these seasonal rhythms unfolding, you may sense your own life settling into a similar gentle cycle, where calm moments return again and again, guiding you toward rest with familiar, soothing grace. Every world receives the wind differently, shaping its own hush, glow, or silence. On Mercury, the solar wind meets thin magnetic pockets that flicker like small shields rising and falling with the sun's breath. Unlike Earth, Mercury lacks a strong global magnetic field. Instead, it has scattered regions of localized magnetism that create tiny, shifting sanctuaries against the wind. Scientifically, these pockets form mini magnetospheres that deflect particles for brief moments before letting them pass. But the imagery feels gentler, like watching sunlight dance across stones in a shallow pool. As the wind flows over Mercury's airless surface, it sculpts wisps of charged particles into delicate patterns, forming a quiet interplay between strength and surrender. Imagining these tiny, flickering pockets holding their shape against the vast solar breeze, you may feel your own inner defenses soften into something lighter and more flexible, allowing calm to move through you without resistance. Venus, wrapped in its dense atmosphere, is shaped by direct particle impact from the solar wind in ways both subtle and serene. Without a strong magnetic field to deflect the flow, the wind interacts directly with the planet's upper atmosphere, gently eroding particles and sweeping them into long, trailing structures. Scientifically, this creates an induced magnetotail, but the imagery feels softer, like a slow river brushing against a cloud bank, shaping it with barely perceptible strokes. The solar wind carves a faint boundary around Venus, molding its ionosphere into shifting layers that rise and fall with solar activity. These interactions occur high above the planet's thick clouds, transforming energy into slow, graceful movement. Imagining the wind brushing against Venus in this delicate way, you may feel something similar within yourself, a soft external touch shaping your thoughts into smoother, calmer forms without ever disturbing their deeper stillness. Mars responds to the solar wind through its patchy magnetic crust, creating subtle, localized interactions that resemble scattered lanterns flickering across a dim landscape. Unlike Earth, Mars once had a global magnetic field that has long faded, leaving behind pockets of magnetism frozen into its crust. Scientifically, these crustal fields create miniature oases where charged particles swirl, redirect, or briefly settle, but the feeling is much gentler, like watching wind slip through a field of small, uneven stones. The solar wind flows over Mars almost freely, shaping its thin atmosphere and slowly lifting particles into space over long periods. Yet these magnetic remnants offer quiet resistance, guiding the wind into graceful, localized swirls. Imagining these subtle dances of wind and crust, you may sense your own thoughts moving in small, gentle eddies, swirling into peaceful patterns that help your awareness rest more easily. Jupiter's enormous magnetosphere resists the solar wind with a presence so vast it resembles an immense, invisible fortress stretching far into space. Scientifically, Jupiter's magnetic field is the strongest of any planet, creating a magnetosphere that dwarfs even the Sun itself in volume. Yet, despite its size, the interaction between wind and field feels surprisingly graceful, a soft deflection rather than a violent clash. The wind curves gently around Jupiter's magnetic boundary, forming smooth arcs and elongated regions where charged particles are redirected with quiet precision. Inside this enormous shield, plasma flows in slow, sweeping patterns, influenced by Jupiter's rapid rotation. Imagining this vast magnetic presence holding back the solar wind, you may feel a similar protective calm forming within yourself, a large inner space where external pressures soften and dissolve before ever reaching the core of your peace. Saturn's rings react to charged particles from the solar wind in delicate, shimmering ways that resemble fine dust catching light in a soft breeze. The icy grains within the rings become electrically charged, allowing the solar wind to subtly influence their motion. Scientifically, these interactions cause faint electromagnetic waves and small rearrangements of ring particles, but the imagery is far more tranquil, like watching frost crystals tremble gently under a passing current of warm air. As the wind flows past, it creates subtle ripples and luminous variations across the rings, altering their glow in ways quiet enough to feel almost like a whisper. Imagining these delicate reactions unfolding across Saturn's vast ring system, you may feel your own inner landscape responding similarly, shifting gently and beautifully under the softest touch of an unseen, calming breeze. Uranus' tilted magnetic field scatters solar wind streams in drifting, asymmetric patterns that feel like quiet currents swirling around a slowly turning lantern. Scientifically, Uranus' magnetic field is tilted nearly 60 degrees from its rotational axis and offset from the planet's center, creating an ever-changing magnetic environment that shifts dramatically as the planet spins. Yet the imagery is far gentler, wind flowing across uneven surfaces, forming unpredictable but graceful spirals. As the solar wind encounters this tilted field, streams of charged particles split, curve, and reform in wandering shapes, producing a constantly shifting magnetosphere, unlike any other in the solar system. These patterns resemble drifting veils, stirred by soft, inconsistent breezes. Imagining these scattered streams moving through Uranus' strange magnetic geometry, you may feel your own thoughts loosening from rigid patterns, drifting into freer, more fluid motion that encourages your awareness to soften and expand into calm openness. Neptune's dynamic magnetic rotation shapes the solar wind into swirling, fluctuating forms that move with a gentle, rhythmic pulse. Scientifically, Neptune's magnetic field is highly tilted and offset, producing a magnetosphere that wobbles and changes orientation as the planet rotates. This creates shifting pathways for charged particles, altering how the wind flows around the planet in patterns that feel like slow-turning eddies in a vast, quiet sea. The solar wind bends, stretches, and twists in response to these movements, forming soft arcs that drift in and out of alignment with the rotating field. The overall effect is serene, as if the wind were responding to a calm, cosmic dance. Imagining these magnetic motions guiding the wind around Neptune, you might sense your own internal currents turning gently, rotating into new, peaceful alignments that help your thoughts settle into deeper, undisturbed quiet. Far from the sun, the solar wind stirs comet tails into long, luminous streams that trail across the darkness like glowing brushstrokes. When comets warm near the inner solar system, sunlight releases dust and gas that form multiple tails. The iron tail responds directly to the solar wind, stretching outward in a straight, delicate line shaped by magnetic forces. Scientifically, this occurs because charged particles in the tail are accelerated along the interplanetary magnetic field. Yet the image feels softer, like a thin ribbon of light being pulled gently by an unseen hand. Even dust tails, though driven mostly by radiation, shift subtly under the wind's influence, curling and drifting with elegant slowness. Imagining these distant tails, shimmering in the wind's quiet touch, you may feel your own awareness lengthening behind you, trailing softly through memory and thought like a calm, luminous echo. Dwarf planets drift inside the heliosphere with quiet steadiness, carried gently through a space shaped by the soft push of the solar wind. Scientifically, these worlds, Pluto, Eris, Haumea, Makemake, and others, reside within the sun's protective bubble, where charged particles and magnetic lines create a subtly structured environment. Yet the imagery is more serene, as though these small, distant planets were floating through a light-filled sea, influenced by currents too gentle to be felt directly. Their thin atmospheres or icy surfaces respond faintly to the wind, forming brief ion tails or subtle seasonal changes that unfold at a pace measured in decades. Imagining these dwarf planets drifting quietly inside the heliosphere, you may feel your own thoughts settling into long, slow motions, moving with patience and softness through vast inner distances that invite rest and reflection. The Kuiper belt is touched by thinning solar wind streams that drift outward like faint whispers, reaching the edge of hearing. Scientifically, this region lies 30 to 50 times farther from the Sun than Earth, where solar wind density becomes extremely low but remains present enough to shape dust and interact with magnetic fields. The wind here feels more like a soft presence than a force, brushing lightly against icy bodies and long orbiting debris. Its touch influences the distribution of particles, guiding them into gentle arcs and diffuse clouds that stretch across the outer solar system. The imagery is peaceful, a dim ocean of frozen worlds receiving the last warm breath of the Sunday. Imagining these thinning streams gliding across the Kuiper belt, you might sense a similar fading of intensity within yourself, as if the busier winds of the day were dissolving into distant calm, leaving only quiet, expansive stillness. At the far frontier, the breeze slows, softens, and prepares to meet the deeper quiet beyond. The gradual slowing of the solar wind near the termination shock unfolds like a long, gentle deceleration across an endless, star-filled plain. Scientifically, this boundary forms where the solar wind loses enough speed that it can no longer outrun the surrounding interstellar medium, creating a broad region of compression. Yet the sensation is far calmer, like watching a drifting tide ease into still water. The particles spread out, their motion becoming less hurried, their flow more spacious. Temperature rises slightly, but the overall feeling is one of soft transition rather than abrupt change. Imagining the solar wind gently slowing as it reaches this distant frontier, you may feel your own momentum easing, as though the pace of your thoughts is reducing naturally, settling toward a quieter, more reflective rhythm that carries you deeper into rest. Beyond the termination shock lies the heliosheath, a warm, calm region where the solar wind drifts slowly through softened currents. Scientifically, the heliosheath forms as the decelerated solar wind becomes denser and hotter, pressing gently outward against the interstellar medium. Yet the imagery here feels serene, like a vast twilight sea where currents move with careful softness, no longer driven by the sun's urgency. Magnetic fields stretch and relax, forming gentle curves that guide particles into broad, unhurried flows. The heliosheath acts as the solar system's outer cushion, absorbing the final momentum of the wind before it meets the deeper quiet of interstellar space. Imagining this warm, expansive region, you may sense a similar buffer forming around your awareness, a transitional space where your thoughts slow, soften, and float freely before dissolving into peaceful stillness. A delicate pressure balance with interstellar particles shapes the boundary of the heliosphere, creating a vast frontier where two quiet forces meet. Scientifically, this balance occurs where the outward push of the solar wind equals the inward pressure of interstellar gas and magnetic fields, forming a smooth, shifting equilibrium. But the imagery is gentler, like two calm breezes meeting in the open air, neither dominating, both softly blending. At this immense distance, particles from both regions mingle slightly, drifting through each other with minimal disturbance. This balance evolves over years, expanding and contracting with the sun's activity, yet always maintaining a tranquil, almost meditative steadiness. Imagining this peaceful equilibrium far from the sun, you might feel your own internal pressures finding balance as well, settling into a quiet middle space where everything feels lighter, softer, and beautifully aligned. At great distance, the magnetic field softens, stretching into thin, delicate strands that drift like fading lines of light across the edge of the heliosphere. Scientifically, the interplanetary magnetic field weakens as the solar wind expands, its strength decreasing with distance until it becomes a faint glow of structure rather than a strong guiding force. Yet the sensation is peaceful, as though the sun's magnetic breath were dissolving into the wide openness of interstellar space. The field no longer shapes the wind strongly. Instead, it becomes a gentle background presence, a soft echo of the sun's rotation carried to unimaginable distances. Imagining this faint magnetic whisper stretching outward, you might sense your own thoughts thinning into subtle traces, letting go of sharp edges and drifting into a spacious calm that feels open, weightless, and deeply restful. Voyagers crossing into quieter interstellar space marks one of the most serene transitions ever recorded, a spacecraft moving from the sun's gentle influence into the deeper hush beyond. Scientifically, this moment occurred when Voyager detected a dramatic drop in solar wind particles and a rise in cosmic rays, indicating it had passed beyond the heliopause. But the imagery is poetic. A small, silent traveler drifting through the last soft breath of the sun and entering a calm, unfamiliar sea. The solar wind's structure fades behind it, replaced by the subtle, pervasive stillness of interstellar plasma. Voyager continues outward without hurry, carrying echoes of the heliosphere on its long, quiet journey. Imagining this crossing, you might feel your awareness stepping gently from one realm of calm into another, moving beyond familiar boundaries into a space even more peaceful, spacious, and serene. Residual solar particles drift outward for decades, wandering through the heliosphere like tiny, glowing embers carried by an endlessly gentle breeze. Scientifically, these particles continue their journey long after leaving the sun, slowing gradually as the wind thins and the surrounding interstellar medium begins to exert its influence. Yet, the imagery feels softer, like sparks from a distant fire floating across a vast, quiet field, their light dimming, but never quite disappearing. Each particle moves with patient persistence, following weakened magnetic lines into regions where space becomes broader and more silent. Their path is not hurried. It is a slow, meditative drift that extends the sun's presence far beyond its visible reach. Imagining these particles gliding outward for decades, you might sense your own lingering thoughts, stretching gently into long, peaceful arcs, continuing softly into the quiet spaces that open around you as you rest. Boundary ripples move through the heliosheath like faint waves traveling across a calm, dark sea. These ripples form when changes in the solar wind's speed or density propagate outward, sending gentle disturbances through the outer layers of the heliosphere. Scientifically, they represent pressure variations and magnetic field fluctuations, but the feeling is far quieter, slow, luminous undulations that pass almost unnoticed through the vast envelope surrounding the Sunday. As they drift, these ripples carry subtle information about the sun's activity, transmitting it across billions of miles with the softness of a whispered message. They do not disrupt the heliosheath. Instead, they add a delicate rhythm to its otherwise still expanse. Imagining these gentle waves spreading outward, you may feel a similar ripple moving softly through your own awareness, releasing tension in quiet pulses and bringing your mind into deeper harmony with the universe's patient rhythms. The heliosphere shrinks and expands with solar cycles, breathing slowly over years in a rhythm that mirrors the sun's magnetic heartbeat. Scientifically, increased solar activity strengthens the solar wind, causing the heliosphere to swell outward, while quieter periods allow it to contract as interstellar pressure pushes gently inward. Yet the imagery feels more organic, like watching a great, translucent bubble inhale and exhale in cosmic slow motion. Each cycle adds a layer of continuity to the solar system, shaping the boundary through which particles pass and altering the environment for distant spacecraft like Voyager. This long, slow breathing gives the heliosphere a living presence, a sense of gentle dynamism that unfolds over decades. Imagining this vast, patient expansion and contraction, you may feel your own breath aligning with it, deepening naturally, helping your body and mind settle into a calmer, more spacious rhythm. Cosmic rays are filtered by the solar wind's outer layers, softened by the gentle shield that surrounds the sun and its planets. Scientifically, the solar wind's magnetic field deflects many high-energy particles from interstellar space, reducing their intensity before they reach the inner solar system. Yet the process feels more like a soft veil catching sharp grains of sand, transforming their harshness into a quieter, diminished presence. As cosmic rays encounter the heliospheric boundary, their trajectories bend, slow, or scatter, allowing only a softened remnant to drift inward. This quiet filtering protects planets, atmospheres, and even biological life from the full force of interstellar radiation. Imagining this gentle protective layer at the edge of the solar system, you may feel a similar filter forming around your own awareness, letting only peaceful thoughts through while harsh, hurried ones fade away into the distance. The final fade of the solar wind into interstellar calm unfolds like the slow disappearance of a warm breeze into an endless night. At the heliopause, the last boundary of the sun's influence, the wind's pressure weakens until it can no longer push back against the interstellar medium. Scientifically, this marks the point where the solar wind's flow becomes indistinguishable from the surrounding plasma. But emotionally, it feels like a quiet, merging, a gentle dissolving of motion into vast stillness. Beyond this edge lies interstellar space, a realm where the sun's breath no longer carries shape or structure. The particles continue onward, but their journey becomes part of a deeper, quieter ocean of cosmic material. Imagining this soft fading at the solar system's frontier, you might feel your own thoughts gently dissolving as well, drifting into a wide, peaceful silence that welcomes rest and deep, uninterrupted calm. Even the breeze has seasons, shaped by a star that lives through vast, repeating rhythms. The 11-year solar activity cycle unfolds like a long, cosmic breathing pattern, rising into energetic peaks before settling into gentle quiet again. Scientifically, this cycle reflects the periodic flip of the sun's magnetic field and the changing number of sunspots, flares, and coronal features, but its feeling is far softer, like watching a distant lantern brighten and dim in patient intervals. During active years, the solar wind becomes textured and complex. During quieter phases, it smooths into calmer streams. This rhythm shapes everything from auroras to the heliosphere's size, creating a repeating, predictable pulse that extends throughout the solar system. Imagining this long, soothing cycle, you may feel your own inner rhythms aligning with it, settling into a steady, patient flow where energy rises and falls naturally, leaving room for deep calm to take hold. High-speed streams from coronal holes sweep across the solar system like long, graceful gusts emerging from dark windows on the sun's surface. Scientifically, coronal holes are regions where magnetic field lines open outward, allowing particles to escape more freely, producing streams that travel faster and farther than typical solar wind. Yet their movement feels poetic, powerful but smooth, like a strong breeze flowing through an otherwise quiet forest. These high-speed streams rotate with the sun, returning in predictable intervals and shaping patterns of auroras and geomagnetic activity at Earth. As they pass, they blend with slower wind regions, creating soft, spiraling structures that drift across millions of miles. Imagining these steady, fast-moving gusts sweeping outward from the sun, you may sense a gentle push within yourself, a quiet forward motion that encourages your thoughts to move more freely into open, peaceful space. Solar minimum brings long, calm periods when the sun's activity settles into its quieter state. Scientifically, this phase is marked by fewer sunspots, reduced magnetic complexity, and a smoother, more uniform solar wind. But the imagery feels soothing, like a lake surface becoming glass smooth after a long night of wind. During solar minimum, the heliosphere relaxes, turbulence declines, and the wind flows in softer, less variable streams. These years offer extended stretches of predictability, where space weather grows gentle and stable. The calm reaches Earth as well, creating fewer auroras, but offering a sense of wider, slower breathing across the entire solar system. Imagining this quiet phase of the sun's life, you might feel your own inner landscape smoothing as well, settling into a long, restful pause that invites deeper reflection and peaceful stillness. Solar maximum brings broader, faster wind regions that ripple through the heliosphere with vibrant yet gentle complexity. Scientifically, increased sunspot activity and stronger magnetic fields create varied flows, coronal mass ejections, and expanded high-speed streams. Yet the feeling is not chaotic, it is more like watching many currents swirl through a wide, open ocean, each moving with its own quiet rhythm. The wind becomes richer in texture, filled with subtle variations that shape auroras, influence planetary environments, and send delicate ripples through distant magnetic fields. Even during maximum activity, much of the wind remains smooth and soft, flowing outward in steady waves that carry the imprint of the sun's heightened energy. Imagining this active, glowing period, the pattern of slow wind returning is like the soft exhale that follows a long cycle of activity. Scientifically, slow solar wind emerges from streamers and closed magnetic regions near the sun's equator, forming broad, gentle flows that reappear as the solar cycle shifts toward quieter phases. These slow winds take their time, drifting outward with a relaxed steadiness that contrasts with the brisk gusts of high-speed streams. Their presence creates smoother conditions across the heliosphere, allowing magnetic structures to settle and planetary interactions to soften. The slow wind carries the subtle texture of the sun's quieter moods, warm, consistent, unhurried. Imagining this gentle return, you may feel your own awareness easing back into a slower rhythm, releasing intensity and sinking into a deeper, calmer flow that encourages rest, softness, and peaceful continuity. Multi-month repeating wind structures drift through the heliosphere like long, gentle waves, returning again and again to the same shoreline. Scientifically, these structures arise from stable features on the sun, such as persistent coronal holes and long-lived magnetic regions which rotate into view each month, sending similar patterns of solar wind outward. But the imagery feels softer, as though the sun were releasing recurring breaths that stretch across space in familiar rhythms. Each structure carries its own signature of speed, density, and magnetic texture, shaping auroras, geomagnetic conditions, and the flow of charged particles far beyond Earth. These repeating patterns provide a sense of continuity, linking one month to the next with quiet echoes of solar behavior. Imagining these gentle returns, you might sense your own inner cycles becoming clearer too, as though parts of your life were aligning into soft, predictable rhythms that help your awareness relax into deeper calm. The rotation-driven 27-day rhythm of the solar wind is like a slow, steady heartbeat that echoes throughout the solar system. Scientifically, this rhythm occurs because the sun rotates roughly once every 27 days, causing high-speed streams, slow wind zones, and magnetic features to sweep past Earth in repeating intervals. Yet the feeling is gentler, a cosmic pulse that rises and falls with unfailing consistency. As each rotation brings new wind textures, space around Earth shifts subtly, creating patterns of quiet days and softly active nights. This rhythm shapes auroral activity, influences atmospheric currents, and creates long, soothing cycles of change. Imagining this dependable, rotating pulse, you may feel a similar cadence forming within yourself. A slow, grounding rhythm that steadies your thoughts and brings your mind into harmony with the universe's broader, patient flow. Coronal hole patterns drift with the seasons of the sun, creating shifting pathways for the solar wind that feel like moving windows of gentle airflow. Scientifically, these holes evolve with the solar cycle, opening or closing across different latitudes and rotating with the sun to send recurring high-speed streams into space. Yet their motion appears tranquil, dark patches sliding across the sun's glowing surface like quiet shadows drifting over warm sand. These shifting coronal holes create seasonal variations in wind patterns at Earth, shaping months-long periods of increased or softened activity. Their gradual changes mirror the slow turning of natural seasons on a distant world, bringing alternating phases of calm and gentle disturbance. Imagining these drifting solar seasons, you may feel your own internal atmosphere adjusting, welcoming subtle changes while remaining rooted in an overall sense of peace and stability. Long-term modulation across decades reflects the sun's deeper cycles, shaping the character of the solar wind with slow, almost imperceptible shifts. Scientifically, variations such as the Gleisberg cycle influence the strength of solar activity over decades, affecting the intensity of magnetic fields, the frequency of high-speed streams, and the size of the heliosphere. Yet the imagery is that of an ancient tide rising and falling softly across a vast beach, too slow to notice moment by moment but unmistakable when viewed across time. These long cycles create eras of stronger winds and quieter epochs where the sun's touch becomes more subtle. Imagining these decades-long modulations, you may feel your own sense of time widen, as though you too were drifting within a larger, quieter pattern that gently shapes your thoughts, emotions, and inner clarity over the years. Quiet intervals that restore balance appear throughout the solar wind's many cycles, providing long stretches where turbulence softens and the streams flow with steady calm. Scientifically, these intervals arise during phases of reduced activity, when sunspots diminish, magnetic structures stabilize, and high-speed streams retreat. But the sensation is like watching a once windy landscape fall into gentle stillness, the air smoothing out until everything feels balanced and unhurried. During these quiet periods, planets experience fewer disturbances, auroras become softer and rarer, and the heliosphere itself seems to relax into a more peaceful configuration. Imagining these restorative intervals, you may sense your own inner environment settling too, embracing moments of quiet that allow your thoughts to rebalance, your emotions to soften, and your awareness to expand into a soothing, restorative calm. Solar wind shaping early planetary atmospheres unfolded as a gentle but persistent influence, guiding the evolution of young worlds during the solar system's earliest ages. Scientifically, the early sun produced a stronger, more forceful wind that interacted with forming atmospheres, stripping some particles while helping others become redistributed or chemically transformed. Yet the imagery feels softer, like a warm, continuous breath passing over new clay, subtly molding each surface. On worlds with strong magnetic fields, this breath carved protective envelopes, helping atmospheres survive and stabilize. On others, it sculpted the upper layers into delicate wisps that drifted outward into space. Over millions of years, this quiet influence helped determine which planets would remain thickly veiled in air and which would be left bare. Imagining this ancient, shaping wind, you might feel the same slow force at work within yourself, gently smoothing rough edges over time and helping your inner landscape take on calmer, more resilient form. The long-term erosion of unprotected worlds is a story told not with violence, but with patient, continuous motion. Scientifically, planets lacking strong magnetic fields such as Mars slowly lose atmospheric particles as the solar wind sweeps them away, pulling ions along magnetic pathways or lifting them into space through gentle acceleration. But the imagery resembles a soft breeze brushing over sand dunes, carrying grains away one by one until entire landscapes subtly shift. Over billions of years, this quiet erosion shapes climate, surface chemistry, and even the potential for life. The wind does not rush. It simply persists, whispering across a planet's boundaries until thin air becomes thinner still. Imagining this patient, cosmic weathering, you may sense how long-term forces in your own life have shaped you softly rather than suddenly, revealing new clarity and calm through slow, enduring change. The wind's role in forming magnetotails unfolds in shapes that resemble long, elegant ribbons streaming behind planets with magnetic fields. Scientifically, when the solar wind presses against a planet's magnetic shield, the field stretches backward, forming a magnetotail that can extend millions of miles into space. Yet the imagery feels peaceful, as though each magnetized world trails a luminous scarf that drifts into the darkness, shaped entirely by the steady breeze flowing past. These magnetotails guide charged particles, store energy, and influence phenomena such as auroras and plasma flows. Even Jupiter and Saturn possess vast, sweeping tails that bend and shimmer in response to changing wind conditions. Imagining these long, drifting structures, you might sense your own thoughts elongating into quiet, graceful lines, extending into the night with softness and continuity, carried gently by currents that move without hurry. Ancient auroras, recorded in rock patterns, reveal the quiet memory of past solar winds, preserved across millions of years. Scientifically, magnetic minerals in volcanic rocks and sediments can capture signatures of intense geomagnetic activity, leaving behind faint traces of ancient solar storms and variations in Earth's magnetic field. But the imagery is more poetic. It is as if the sky's lights once brushed the Earth and left a subtle imprint, a soft echo of shimmering colors etched into stone. These records show that auroras danced above early worlds long before humans existed to witness them, forming luminous arcs that reflected the sun's distant moods. Imagining these hidden memories stored within rocks, you may feel the deep continuity of natural rhythms, sensing how even flashes of beauty leave lasting impressions that endure quietly through time. Solar wind carving structure into space weather is not a sudden event, but an ongoing act of shaping, like a gentle sculptor working tirelessly on an infinite canvas. Scientifically, the wind determines conditions throughout the heliosphere, guiding magnetic storms, influencing radiation levels, and sculpting plasma environments around planets. Yet its work feels more like soft chiseling, subtly refining the contours of space through continuous flow. Slow wind creates broad, smooth regions that feel like calm plains, while high-speed streams produce ripples and spirals that drift across millions of miles. Coronal mass ejections add brief, textured strokes, yet the underlying wind always returns to its steady, guiding presence. Imagining this quiet cosmic carving, you may feel the same shaping force in your own life. Gentle, persistent motions that smooth your inner world, helping peace take form across even the busiest landscapes of your thoughts. Its calming presence between solar storms reveals the solar wind not as a force of disruption, but as a soft, continuous background breath that steadies the entire heliosphere. Scientifically, even during active periods, most days are governed by the quiet, steady flow of particles moving outward in smooth streams. This gentle baseline creates stability, allowing planetary magnetic fields, comet tails, and interplanetary plasma to settle into predictable patterns. Yet the imagery is even more serene, like the stillness between distant waves on a vast ocean, where the water rests, breathes, and holds its shape. Between storms, the wind smooths itself, reducing turbulence and letting the heliosphere fall into a gentle rhythm. Imagining these peaceful intervals, you may feel your own inner weather calming as well. The storms of thought and tension giving way to the quiet, supportive flow that holds you steady and allows rest to deepen. The wind, as a carrier of the sun's magnetic fingerprint, brings a sense of personal connection across billions of miles, as though each particle carried a subtle signature of its origin. Scientifically, the solar wind drags the sun's magnetic field outward, imprinting its spiral pattern, the Parker spiral, onto the entire heliosphere. But the imagery feels tender, like threads of light stretching from the sun's surface to the far edge of space, weaving an immense, softly glowing tapestry. Every charged particle holds a piece of this magnetic memory, a gentle message from the star that birthed it. As the wind flows, it shares this imprint with planets, moons, and distant spacecraft. Imagining this magnetic fingerprint drifting through space, you may sense your own life touched by a similar continuity, a quiet pattern running through your thoughts, linking one moment to the next with soft, unbroken thread. How the flow maintains heliospheric balance is a story of gentle equilibrium, a steady exhale that shapes the boundary between our solar system and the interstellar sea. Scientifically, the solar wind creates the heliosphere by pushing outward against interstellar gas and magnetic fields, maintaining a protective bubble around every planet and object touched by the sunday. Yet the sensation is softer, like a warm breath forming a sphere of comfort around a sleeping world. The flow adjusts subtly with each shift in solar activity, expanding and contracting the heliosphere in rhythms that feel patient and deeply stable. Without this ongoing wind, cosmic radiation would flood inward, and space would feel colder, harsher, less sheltered. Imagining this delicate balancing act, you may feel your own inner boundaries settling into place, held by a quiet flow of energy that keeps everything harmonious, steady, and safe. The wind continuing across millennia reflects the sun's profound constancy, a soft, unbroken stream that has flowed since long before life arose on Earth, and will continue long after we are gone. Scientifically, the solar wind has persisted for billions of years, its presence shaping worlds, carving magnetic fields, and influencing the chemistry of planets and comets. But emotionally, it feels like an ancient whisper, a long-lived breath stretching across generations, epochs, and eras. The particles drifting outward today join those released centuries ago, all part of one continuous journey from the sun's heart into the deep dark beyond. Imagining this timeless flow, you may feel your own sense of time expand, recognizing that some currents, both in the universe and within yourself, move slowly, steadily, and beautifully across the ages. The quiet promise that the sun keeps breathing outward is one of the most comforting truths in all of astronomy. Scientifically, as long as the sun lives for billions of years yet to come, it will emit a constant stream of charged particles, sustaining the heliosphere and shaping the space through which planets travel. Yet the feeling is deeply peaceful, like knowing that a gentle, steady breath surrounds you always, even when you cannot see it. This outward flow tells the story of a star that supports, protects, and connects every world in its care. The wind may change in strength or texture, but it never stops. It is the sun's enduring lullaby to the solar system. Imagining this persistent, calming breath, you may feel an inner reassurance settling over you, a quiet promise that stability, continuity, and warmth remain, even in the vast silence of space. As we come to the close of this long, drifting journey through the solar wind, the space around you may feel a little wider, a little quieter, and perhaps a little softer than when we began. Over the past 100 gentle steps, we have followed a breeze that began as a shimmer on the sun's surface and traveled across the entire solar system. We watched it unfold through magnetic threads, move through planetary atmospheres, shape auroras, carve long tails behind worlds, and eventually fade into the deep stillness of interstellar space. And throughout all of it, the wind has revealed itself not as a force of disruption, but as a calm, steady breath that carries the memory of the sun outward in every direction. The deeper you follow it, the more its presence becomes a symbol of continuity. Even when the sun is quiet, the wind continues. Even during storms, the quiet flow returns. Across millions of miles, across centuries of time, the solar wind remains a soft, steady rhythm weaving connection between worlds that will never meet and distances that would otherwise feel impossible. There is something comforting in knowing that this gentle stream persists whether we pay attention to it or not, shaping the space we live in with a patience that stretches far beyond the scale of human life. As the solar wind reaches Earth, it touches our world in subtle ways you can't see but can almost sense once you know they're there. It guides auroras to paint the sky in quiet curtains of green and red. It pushes gently on our magnetosphere, creating ripples and arcs that shift with the seasons of the Sunday. It brushes past satellites, drifts through the upper atmosphere, and flows around Earth like a slow, invisible river moving through the night. And even though the wind is billions of particles rushing outward, the effect from here feels more like a soft, continuous hum, a reminder that we, too, live inside the breath of a star. And as we moved outward with it, the world around us grew quieter. Past Mars, the solar wind spreads thin, becoming almost a whisper. Around Jupiter and Saturn, it glides past massive magnetic shields that bend it into elegant spirals. Farther still, it touches icy worlds and drifting dwarf planets, shaping their exospheres with the lightest, most delicate pressure. Beyond that, it becomes a faint glow moving through the Kuiper belt, a last, warm trace of the sun reaching into the cold outskirts of the solar system. Eventually, after traveling billions of miles for decades, the wind slows. It warms slightly. It becomes dense and gentle in the heliosheath, where its strength fades and its presence stretches into long, quiet currents. Then, at the very edge, the heliopause, the solar wind dissolves. It lifts into a grand stillness where the sun's influence ends, and the calm of interstellar space begins. Voyager crossed that threshold, carrying with it the last breath of the wind, stepping from the warm interior of our heliosphere into the soft, ancient hush beyond. And perhaps, in a deep and quiet way, that is where you find yourself now, at the edge of a long, calm journey, ready to drift into a deeper stillness of your own. Just as the solar wind softens as it reaches the outer boundary, your thoughts can soften too. The day's noise becomes faint. Movement slows. The inner landscape becomes more spacious, more open, more serene. You might imagine your mind like a small vessel carried by the solar wind. The turbulence has faded. The long streams of gentle flow guide you. Gravity loosens its hold. There is nothing to resist, nothing to solve, nothing to hold on to. Only the soft continuation of breath, expanding and relaxing, echoing the very rhythm that shapes the heliosphere. Thank you for sharing this quiet time, for traveling through this soft science with an open, resting mind. If you'd like, you can share where you're listening from. Your presence adds warmth to this peaceful space we build together each night. For now, let yourself drift with the last gentle traces of the solar wind. Let your awareness settle into its calm and sleep well. Good night.